Auckland Central It's in the Ballot show. We're here live from the Herne Bay Pletanque Club, and these, I'd say, are some of your candidates. Others have not made it here tonight. But with every election, as we usually say, there's one thing standing in every candidate's way, and that's your vote. And kia ora, good evening, and welcome to today's show for It's in the Ballot here. Today we have a good variety. I think we've got, half of the Auckland Central candidates, and probably the half you haven't met yet. But we're going to obviously have a bit of a fun day with our good candidates here on why they should get the electoral vote for the next upcoming general election. So let's kick off with, is it Madeleine? Madeleine, let's kick off. You get to start off with your opening statement. You've got 60 seconds. If you want. No, actually sit down. No, that's easier for the camera person. Okay, let's fire it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm a local resident and a proud Aucklander. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Vulnerable animals need a strong, unwavering voice in Parliament. I will advocate for a just transition away from industries and practices that treat animals as commodities, not only to improve the lives of animals and the health of our communities, but also to reduce environmental degradation, protect our ecosystems, enhance our food security, and lower our resource consumption. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Paul, your opening statement.
Okay. Yeah, hi people. I'm also a local resident in as much as I live in Auckland. I'm standing for Rock the Vote because it's a new movement. It's the first time in central politics, but they stand for personal freedoms, transparent democracy, and traditional values. And we are not politicians. None of us are politicians. But we've had 88 years of politicians, and all we've managed to do in that 88 years is flip-flop from left to right and red to blue and back again. So we think it's time that we had a little bit of fresh blood in the Parliament, and we can actually have a voice for the people rather than the voice to the people. So yeah, vote for me as your electorate candidate. I will do everything I can to make your voice heard in Parliament, and not the other way around. So vote for me, and also vote for Freedoms New Zealand for your party vote, because that's a second tick for me as well. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Guy.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you all very much in the studio for coming in to be with us today. And thank you for those online who join us from around the region and across the nation. You too are very welcome. Why am I standing as an MP? Well, it's a core point within the New Nation Party that we return democracy to New Zealand. Every single one of the MPs in the House at the moment have long forgotten that it is their job to represent the people who sent them to Wellington. And we want to turn that round into democracy by saying to you, vote for the person, whichever one of us it is, who's going to best represent you from this electorate and indeed all the other electorates, but then party vote for New Nation Party so that we can create an army of the people in the House to stop whatever governing party there is excelling themselves and doing the stupid things that we've seen over the last few years.
Okay, and next up we've got, now, do you prefer to be known as Christopher or Chris?
My mother calls me Christopher when I'm in trouble. I go by the name Christ, but the ballot won't let me write that. So you can call me Christopher, and it might cause some kind of PTSD, but I do take cannabis for that. So yeah, I'm inside my therapeutical window. So call me what you want. Basically, I'm here to be servant to the public.
Oh, fair enough. So your opening statement.
Well, after that opening statement, I don't know how to say any more about my political party. Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party, the shadow banned party since 1996, standing out for the animals, the elderly, the middle-aged, and anybody else that still hasn't come out of their cannabis closet. We just had a referendum, 1.4 million people, swing vote of 70,000, and sadly the other 120 delegates down in Wellington there don't want cannabis spoken of. So we are trying to still represent ourselves and all of the cannabis consumers. The endocannabinoid system is a body system that's not known about and or spoken about in the medical industry for the last 50 to 80 years, or maybe it has been mentioned and they've decided not to inform us about it. We've currently got a medical system that we are able to have cannabis prescribed to us by our doctors, and I'm looking forward to inviting everybody to have a more safer harm reduction alternative to the intoxicants that we have readily available. So I'm here for adult choice, pro-choice and body sovereignty for all of the citizens of Aotearoa and CBD.
Okay, thank you for that. And last up, Andi, your opening statement.
Hello. Do I wait until I'm on the screen? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Andi. I was born in Palmerston North. I've been in Auckland in the city centre for about the last 10 years in a city centre apartment. While I'm standing this time, you might remember me from the local elections, we might not. There's a reason why there's a lot of candidates here today from none of the major parties, and that's because with our current voting system, you win your first choice. If you wanted to take a punt on a party or person you're not sure whether it's going to get elected or not, there is a risk that your vote, if you don't get that candidate in, gets wasted. So some people are afraid of split votes and wasted votes. But there's a thing called the single transferable vote, which is a way of recycling your first choice if it doesn't get in. So then people are more likely to take a punt on novel and small issues, which big parties really don't need to champion in order to get voted in. And so I'm about trying to show that independent voices can still run. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it sounds like we've got a very good advocator for STV. Now, just for any of the people who are wondering why we don't have many of the other candidates, including the big 4, 5, 6 parties, we have had the unusual step with the returning officer for Auckland Central, who has blatantly refused to give us details. Now, I'm amazed we've managed to get these candidates here, including some of them were phone calls that were within the last 2 hours. Auckland Central's returning officer said, go to Google. Now, we put in a request for the contact details back on September the 20th or around about that date. We sent a follow-up about a week later, and we basically were ignored. Other areas, a good example is on the 16th of September, we put in a request for Remataka Electorate, Rongotai, Wellington Central, and all of those ones gave us the details, no hassles whatsoever within 24 hours, and had the means where we could sit there and deal with it. And I would like to sit there and point out, if the Auckland returning officer, you're watching this show, we are dealing with over 180 candidates across New Zealand. We don't have time to play silly buggers like your game. So in future, if you want to help us do justice for democracy, don't stand in the way. It makes it a lot harder for us to give us an equal opportunity. And the thing is, some people might not blame you for the decisions you've made to stall this show from happening. Some people might sit there and say it's us deliberately not inviting candidates there, which is not us. So in future, think twice before you do it, and don't sit there and stall us on there. And it'll be interesting to see if you actually did this to other media organisations or singled us out. If you chose to single us out, you made a very bad decision there. And I hope in future you think twice before doing that. Otherwise we would have to step in and go to, say, the Ombudsman, which I do remember mentioning in an email when you doubled down on the contact details that we're considering the Ombudsman. I don't like going to the Ombudsman. I usually use that as a threat when I have to deal with wins. I do not want to use that against the Electoral Commission, considering they've got very pressed with their resources. So that's my moan and groan with the local returning officer. And can I just sit there and say, for every other returning officer we've dealt with in the country, you're doing a fantastic job. And thank you for Angel from Manarewa, who went out of the way to make sure we had a few candidates who get on there. Now, for those who are wondering in the electoral boundaries, I'm sorry we haven't got the map ready to go for tonight, but can our candidates give us an idea of which suburbs Auckland Central are in so the voters can get an idea who can vote for you? Who would like to kick off what suburbs?
Well, I could start because I've been tramping the streets and desperately asking people that they really should vote for me. And we're talking about Herne Bay and the other two bays. We're talking about a little bit of Grafton. We're talking about the entire area of the CBD and out as far towards St Heliers as Mechanics Bay. That just about gives you the answer.
I also know Waiheke Island is part of Auckland Central.
Yes, I had trouble catching the ferry because the ferry operator is now restricting all the ferries that they use to Waiheke, and that will be one of the points we fight for the people of Waiheke Island.
And Andi, what were you?
I'd also like to add a shout out to people who live in apartments. They're known as non-private dwellings. I was a census collector for non-private dwellings. It's really hard to get access to some of them, and obviously hard for people to reach out to the people in the apartments, like halls of residences. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And make sure if you're not enrolled, get yourself enrolled. You can enroll right on the polling booth on the day. You don't need ID. If you do fill out a paper form, make sure you put your signature on it, because if you don't do that, it doesn't. They have to send it back to you to update. That's one of the things I remember from my electoral roll work days, was those people not putting their signatures on. Now, the questions we think you'll be asking after watching today's show. Can you please go on to camera 3, please, Ian? Okay, and I'll get it so I can actually read it on here. Okay, so are Kiwis prepared to see New Zealand residential house sales reach 30% to overseas buyers in order to receive a tax cut? Is it time to triple the Serious Fraud Office budget to $49 million to match the efforts and resources MSD spends on investigating benefit fraud? And this one, very local for the people in the area. Will commercial fishing in the Hauraki Gulf be a thing of the past after the election? So those are some topical questions we'd like to do. And I would like to welcome back Jill for stepping in as our local question host. How are you this afternoon?
Very good. And I just have to apologise to the 5 people sitting here. It was me who gathered you all here this morning, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You've done a good job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now with the question, with the questions here for It's in the Ballot, each candidate picks the box number and then gets to answer the question that's in the box. Now we do have there where each candidate has 2 button cards. So if a candidate who, what's the best way of describing that? This is what happens when you have a mind blank. I'd like to interject. Well, that's a good way of putting your button card. So yeah, the button cards are where if a candidate wants to add their comments to that question, they can go in and put their use their button card to add in their answer. They only have 2 of them, so they've got to use them wisely. And if there is a bit of a hairy question that they don't like, they can defer it to another candidate. And I cheekily always like to sit there and say, defer it to one who's not here. Particularly if they're part of the main parties. So now, because we've got a good number of candidates here, we use a random list order generator to get our orders for each round. Guy, you get to go up first. What box number would you like to pick?
You're assuming I can count, of course.
Yeah.
And I'll go for number 12.
We have letter U. What is your policy on tackling New Zealand's obesity problem?
Well, there's a considerable amount of answers I could give to that. We need to look at the cause of it. Part of the cause is people going for sugary drinks. Part of the problem is people excessively eating, and I mustn't mention a fast food company, but there's no doubt it adds to obesity. At the end of the day, it comes back to two things: education and cost of living. Thank you. Yes, I've got 26 seconds to go. The problem of cost of living is that people go for the fast food outlets because they simply can't afford anything else. We will make sure that if you earn less than 100,000, the first 25,000 is entirely tax-free. That'll give you another $250 a month to buy some decent food.
Thank you.
Can I just butt in for a second? if all candidates, and I know you didn't get much of an induction today because of the time, but if you could butt in probably after the candidate has actually answered their question. So now would be a good time for you to butt in.
No. You do it at the end. It's not like Parliament with a point of order.
All right, Joe. They have their minute. You show your card. And could you all please surrender your cards under your chair so we know that you've had your cards. So we have a button from Andi.
Yep.
Well, first of all, what's being said is all right. I'd just like to share my experience when I went to, I was in Hotel Waterloo in Wellington recently when I went to referee at a fencing competition. Now, I went with a friend and I got a bunch of scallops the day before, and I was shucking the scallops in the shared kitchen area of the Hotel Waterloo. And so there was about 20 scallops in the sink. And there was an elderly, kind of rough-looking man, possibly Māori, and he was cooking his dinner. And his dinner was a bunch of 2-minute noodles with nothing else. So knowing that vegetables are very important for your health, I just gave him some scallops, which was nice, and he gave me some bread. But that was his dinner, just 2-minute noodles. So I was brought up in a household where we eat food. Vegetables was a big part of our diet. There was a study in some recent year which said that lutein is a necessary prerequisite for your brain's health when you're young and when you're old. And they found the effect stacks with omega-3. Basically, you're not as intelligent and you don't process things as quickly if you don't have lutein in your diet. And one major source is vegetables. And so there was a study, it's called Lutein Across the Lifespan, if you want to look that up on Google. And so I'd like to say more availability of green vegetables would be really nice. And one thing which could be a way to get at is less urban green spaces which can't be eaten and more which can. Yes, thank you.
And we have another two buttons. So we'll go for you, Paul, first.
Okay, firstly, we recognise that personal health is a personal responsibility, and the education around a good healthy eating, a good healthy physical regime, for example, it actually should start in the family. But because the family, that education has not been passed on from generation to generation, our school system has actually failed those families in the very first place. So instead of having the RSE curriculum, which we would take out of the health system, we would introduce a healthy living curriculum instead, so that we can restart the education process for kids, rather that is not getting passed down from parents. So, basically the system has let our people down. You can tax them as much as you like, but it's not going to incentivize them to make good decisions. The other thing that's already been mentioned is the budgets. We agree with New Nation Party's policy of the 25,000, but we also believe, and this is a policy that has been around for a long, long time, we also recognise that GST is a very targeted and a very oppressive taxation system. So we would remove GST and replace it with a 1% financial transaction tax. It goes across the board and it's much fairer, and it will return in at least the same amount, so it's cost neutral.
Okay, and our next button.
Can we butt into a button?
No.
Yeah, well, yes, you can, but you'd have to use all your cards. So it wouldn't be advisable.
Would be wise. Yeah.
So thanks both. Look, we are obviously an animal rights party. A lot of what's not talked about is how we thrive on a plant-based diet. It's shown study after study to assist in developing healthy populations. Personally speaking, I believe the pressures on our public health system would reduce hugely if we had healthier eating patterns. Eating meat and dairy has been related to diabetes, cardiac problems, and some kinds of cancer, especially colon cancer. The AJP wants all New Zealanders to live healthy lives. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
And just want to ask, are you also in the vegan club as many of your fellow candidates are? Okay, I think you have more things in common than what the ACT Party has in diversity, because I think they called diversity in their caucus was having a vegetarian.
The only issue I have with that answer is that most animals eat meat as well.
And talking about animals, we've got a little friend over here, a bird who's obviously interested in politics. So I don't know if someone wants to just sort of guide it outside before it's a little worried about human beings.
Okay.
Lovely, thank you.
Madeleine, you get to choose the next box number.
We have question K for kilo. What is New Zealand's biggest challenge, and what is the key policy your party is using to respond to it?
Thank you. Speaking personally, I wish more voters prioritised a more compassionate, non-violent and sustainable world. Is this better?
Like an ice cream, like licking an
I can
ice
do
cream.
that, thank you. I would like to see climate change solutions made a priority and more support for economic models that are more appropriate to the problems that we face now, such as the circular economy that AJP advocates. I would like more people to see that everything is interconnected, that the rights and welfare of all beings, human and non-human, and the planet are interwoven. We need more effective solutions to help animals and the planet. One of these is a transition away from animal agriculture to plant-based farming.
Button, please.
We have your last button. Oh, no, you haven't used the button yet, have you?
No.
No.
Okay. Oh, you're first. Yep.
The biggest problem that faces New Zealand is, let me ask you, when you hear the sort of draconian behaviour from our government, without regard for consultation or people's interests, don't you sometimes wonder how Kiwis can do that to Kiwis? And the reality is they're not making it up themselves. There is a control or influence coming from the WEF, the World Economic Forum, through the United Nations and down into our government to influence the way our government behaves towards its people. And if you doubt what I'm saying or you think it's a conspiracy theory, then just Google World Economic Forum and Agenda 2030 and find out exactly what they propose for the world and New Zealand. We will solve that problem because when you give us the authority to have any influence at all, we will come out of the United Nations and all associated agencies.
Okay, Christ. What box number?
Lucky 13.
We have letter F for Foxtrot. Current information from overseas indicates that vaping is not a healthier option to smoking. Children of primary school age are becoming addicted. What is your party's plan to address this health concern?
Cannabis is the answer. If we remove the single-use vape cartridges from every single shop that is popping up left, right, and centre in every single town and city in our country, and put a safer alternative out there, which I know might seem weird to everybody. Cannabis is the answer. It's already proven in other countries where people are consuming what is known as hemp cannabis, and they're having it as a THC-free smoking alternative. It has all of the terpenes, which are called aromatic compounds, like you're sipping on a lovely gin and tonic and it has lemon squeeze on it. It's not for the kids, but if a child is to find cannabis, they will do no harm to themselves. They will enrich their own human body's endocannabinoid system. We don't have an internal vaping system. Remove vapes from single use, allow adults to have free choice of expensive vape liquids and expensive units, and remove it out of harm's way for the children.
Thank you. Okay, Andy, what box number? Yeah. Your microphone so that we at home can hear you.
Alrighty. I'll just take the closest one. Is that number 28? I mean, it's as good as guess as any. It's like, I mean, if we select these by random chance, why don't we select representatives randomly as well? It's pretty representative. Anyway.
Okay.
That's a great idea, Andy.
We have P for Papa.
Oh, yeah.
Would you double or halve our our population growth? I'll repeat that. Would you double or halve our population growth?
This is a fun one. So first of all, it's not just me who has to decide what's our target population number for each electorate. It should really be done on a per electorate basis. So I think for each electorate, we could have periodic, maybe 10 yearly referendums on what the target population could be, and how people react to that target, that's a different matter. But obviously legally, really the main options you have for target populations is you either control births, deaths, immigration, or immigration. Those are the four options you have at your disposal. Obviously, there's a lot that you can't touch, but just the fact that you actually per electorate, you all decide, you all go in your little groups and you all discuss, and you decide, not the group of us elected people in Wellington, but you decide your electorate, what do you want to be your target population in your electorate? That's my idea. Thank you.
That's definitely something a bit different. Well, put it this way, you could ask to jump up your population and that could end up having half your electorate cut out. So, Paul, you want to use the button?
Why not? Look, at the end of the day, our population is way out of control as far as the infrastructure that we have in place to cope with it. But the decisions around immigration is not being made by this country. I agree about the United Nations, and I want to talk about one particular thing from the United Nations, and that's the Compact for Safe, Regular and Orderly Migration. Now, this was a document that under John Key, Peter Sharples went away and signed. Oh no, this one was Winston Peters, wasn't it? Yeah, this was Winston Peters went away to Morocco and signed it. What it does is it actually makes illegal migration legal. It actually influences the lawmaking process in New Zealand. Our own Crown Law Office said so. So we need to take back control of our own borders, and we need to take back control of our own policies.
Okay, and now, Paul, you get to choose the next box number.
Yeah, I'll have 21, thanks.
Oh, yes, the voting age at one point in time.
With any luck, again.
I don't know, Grandma might disagree at 95.
We have question M for Mike. The statement, opposition parties do not win elections, governments lose them. Do you agree with the statement?
No, I don't agree with that statement. I don't think parties win or lose elections. I think it's more through the influence of media, media statements they tend to be the biggest influencers in the country, particularly around the time of an election. You'll notice that the 5 parties here are all minor parties. The reason for that is because the other 5 or 6 parties don't need to attend these sort of events. They get, for example, Labor 1.2 million plus of the broadcasting fund allocation. That's over a quarter of the allocation goes to one party. So there's no way that you can have a fair and equitable election when that sort of misrepresentation goes on. We've got the minor parties, and we're talking about the main minor parties like Freedom's New Zealand. They get a mere $66,000, and that's to cover the 4 parties under that umbrella. You know, that's $15,000 a party. You can't run a campaign on that. Most minor parties run on volunteers and whatever budget that the candidates themselves and the members of those parties can put in. It's time we went back to a system that actually was fair and equitable for all parties.
Sounds like another advocate for STV in one aspect or another. Okay, Christ, what box number? You get to start the next round.
I would like to pick, ironically, let's go with 16.
What's special about 16?
Well, at that age, your child can go out and get a tattoo
Oh,
with parental consent.
just like marriage.
So, Christopher, we have question L for Lima. The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, said that no one was forced to get the COVID vaccine. Do you agree with that?
I do believe that I witnessed several occasions where we were given very serious alternatives to freedom. We were required, suggested, implied, and every other terminology known to the human man, where we felt obligated and genuinely concerned for our fellow citizens by having to do what our elders ask. If you have ever been a child, I was a child once, now I'm an adult, and sometimes my mother and father were both wrong. I believe that nobody was forced to. I've been forced to do things myself. And I tell you, there's serious repercussions when you get forced to do things. So I believe he is probably true in his legal statement. He's probably had legal advisory to tell him that nobody was forced to get any form of COVID vaccine. God bless, one love.
Okay, next up, Paul. What box number?
I'll have a go at 18, thank you.
Nobody wanted to butt in on that one. That was a pretty good one.
I know.
So, Paul, we have question C for Charlie. How are you going to address the cost of living crisis?
Okay, we believe the answer to the cost of living crisis is around the taxation system. As I've said before, we recognise that the taxation system is targeted, it is oppressive, and it is designed to keep people at the bottom of the heap. So we agree that the taxation system needs to be fair in that the first 25,000 should be tax-free. We believe in income splitting. We believe that a parent who is looking after a child is doing an important job in society, if not more important than a lot of the ones that people get paid to spend 40 hours a week at. We also believe that GST is an oppressive and unwarranted taxation, and as I've said before, a financial transaction tax, because the corporates don't pay GST on most of their income. The Taxation Act, for example, is a huge document, but only the first 5 pages are about the actual information of the act. The rest of it is about exemptions. So it's about being fairer to the people at the bottom of the pile and lifting them up rather than bringing everybody else down.
Now, just before we move on, can you explain income splitting, especially to our younger voters who probably don't know what income splitting means?
Okay, income splitting assumes that you have two parents. So one parent is bringing the children up at home and is not in what we would call gainful employment. Mind you, I would disagree with that statement in itself. So that parent is staying at home. The parent who's out earning an income, that income, let's say $40,000 a year for the sake of a simple number, $20,000 of that would get attributed to the person that's working, and $20,000 would be attributed to the parent that's staying at home looking after the child. That way it keeps you in a lower tax bracket and stops the income earner from entering into the next tax bracket. So that's pretty much how it works.
Thank you for that. Okay, Madeleine, what box number would you like to pick?
So, Madeleine, we have question AB Alpha Bravo. What are the three most important issues that New Zealand is facing?
Sorry,
Yes.
The last question.
Yeah. It's what happens when there's only 26 letters in the alphabet. Well, in the English alphabet.
Okay, so in a recent poll, Kiwis expressed the cost of living as number one, followed by housing and climate change. Certainly a whole foods, plant-based diet can be much cheaper. We have a flagship policy to gradually transition New Zealand to a plant-based economy, meaning 50% fewer greenhouse gas emissions and more availability of land for housing.
Okay, and just want to ask, a big push on the local fruit and vegetable markets, considering now I'm not sure about the Auckland example, but I can very speak about the Wellington example, and your Rongotai candidate, Atom Emmet, is a frequent visitor of the local market, Newtown Market, where the fruit and vegetable prices are about 30% below the supermarket. What ways are we going to get to make sure we have more of those markets staying there and they're not going to be stamped out by the credit corporates, such as Foodstuffs and Progressive?
That's a very good question. So I think just supporting our local farmers is really the first thing to do. Encouraging people to go to farmers markets. That's going to help a lot.
Okay. I love the... Yep, I love the answer about supporting local, and yeah, I do coffee at the Newtown Market, so that's how I know half all the stuff that's going around. And Adam has been very good at getting us contact for the Animal Justice Party. Yeah. Now, Guy, you get next box number.
I'll take 22, please.
Okay, Guy, we have R for Romeo. What will happen to the winter energy payment if your party is elected to govern?
Well, first of all, we have to review them because they are patently inadequate at the moment. But at the same time, we have to make sure that that review is wise and sensible in the context of the appalling economic condition that this government has left us in. We actually don't have any money to spend. But we in the NMP have a heavy streak of compassion. And the reality is, I will not go forward and allow our old people and our needy people to shiver in damp houses through another winter. So we will conduct a review, and I don't want to really prejudice the outcome of that, but I'm pretty damn certain it's going to tell us that we need to increase it and we need to index it in line with the price index so that they continue to enjoy warm, dry winters in the years to come.
Okay, next up, Andy, what box number?
I'll take the closest one again to you. That would be probably number one, I guess. Number one, that's the closest one. Makes it easier to reach the other ones later.
So, Andy, we have question Y for Yankee. Will your party equip the Serious Fraud Office with a similar financial investigation budget that the Ministry of Social Development, that's MSD, uses to detect benefit fraud?
Well, first of all, yes, definitely, but take it from the MSD budget after we have a universal basic income, which makes most of the MSD functions less relevant, or something similar to that. Basically, serious fraud is a lot of money, and that is a lot. If you're looking at the amount of gain per dollar spent, it will probably be better to invest more in that area rather than trying to chase people up, whether they are currently single or not. I mean, how do people even know that anyway? How do they investigate that?
Well, a definition
the second
from
thing
Wins
is, sorry, I'm just going to not hit the E-button just yet. So the question was your party. So I'm going to reiterate once again that I don't have a party. Now, I'd like to talk why I don't have a party. That is because there are pros and cons to party membership. And in a party, you have to stick to the brand identity of the party. And the brand identity is often chosen to have as little overlap with other parties as possible, even if they're good. This is because of the fear of wasted votes or split votes when parties are overlapping their target market. As an independent candidate, my target market is basically everyone who respects my vision of respecting your vote. No, not just tossing your vote in the trash if your actual first choice doesn't get voted in. Modern computer science allows us to recycle your vote to your next choice if your first one doesn't get in. This is called single transferable vote. Can I ask why any other candidate, why none of them and no party yet has tried raising awareness for single transferable vote? Even Palmerston North has single transferable vote. And so if you want to sign the referendum that I made for Auckland, it's in my Linktree bio in my Instagram profile. Yeah. Thank you.
And just for those who might be wondering, a definition of a relationship according to Wins can be as far as what do you call it, a marriage certificate by one case manager's definition and 2 Tinder dates, possibly by another, or even as far as to your brother visiting you and saying hello as being a caring sibling. So that is how extreme our relationship definition is by work and income, depending how the case manager on the day determines it.
And this is how your tax is spent.
Yeah. Now, were you about to put on the button, Paul?
I used my two, but very quickly, if that's all right.
15 seconds.
Okay. I think it's totally wrong to redistribute the responsibility from MSD to the Serious Fraud Office. What should be happening is that MSD should be being held to account to do their job. If they need restructuring, if they need re-educating, if they need restaffing, then that's what you do. You don't pass the buck to another
I don't think
company.
that question was intended for that reply. It was more of saying the fact that the Serious Fraud Office budget is $14.5 million a year to investigate serious fraud, while at the same time we spend $49 million a year to chase benefit fraud. And we probably get as much money in return from chasing benefit fraud as we spend investigating on the Serious Fraud Office budget. So
I understand the question, but the implication of the question is that it's just shifting the responsibility.
Oh, I mean, I want them to go after serious fraud, to be honest. But yeah, it was. Now, Paul, you get next box number. I know.
Okay, give me number 5, please.
So we have question Q for Quebec. Nice and simple. Should we review the ban on single-use plastics?
Should we review it? Well, definitely we should review it. I don't agree with a full-out 100% ban straight away. Banning shopping bags, for example, yeah, it might stop a few, but it's not the bags that are the problem. It's what people do with them. We used to use them all the time at home for other things, but the fact that you're banning something just because it's an ideological insight is the wrong reason. It needs to be managed through a process where you can come up with an alternative that is both environmentally and financially sustainable and reasonable. Because at the moment you get people going into the supermarket who can't even carry their stuff home. They carry it out to the car, throw it on the back seat, and then make 4 trips into the house. I guess the alternative.
A button. Thank you, Madeleine.
I think we need to take some personal responsibility here. In my opinion, We've got microplastics, we've got sea turtles, birds, sperm whales found with plastic in their stomachs. The Animal Justice Party promotes sustainability. We are wanting healthy land, healthy oceans, healthy people, healthy wildlife.
As do we all.
Okay, Christ, what box number?
Rua.
So, Chris, we have question X for X-ray. Do you think that transgender females should be able to compete in women's sports?
It depends on what the definition of a transgender female is, and nobody can come up with the definition. So, as a trained martial artist that does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Taekwondo with both males and females, I can assure you that what you've been given by God in your reproductive organ does and doesn't place you in a position to do athletic sports. I feel that if they want to participate in athletic sports, then there should be a subcategory for a transgender, just as we have the Olympics. And then, sorry about my NPC, we used to call it the Special Olympics. I'm not even too sure if I'm allowed to say that right now, but we used to have that as well.
Don't know what the new name is.
I'm not too sure what the new name is. There's probably a new name, and I mean not to offend Paralympics. Okay, to all the people who have lost limbs and are still wanting to participate in some form of Roman Colosseum activities to prove their worth. And much as Andi pointed out, maybe we should represent ourselves at a random basis, where I participate in the 100 metre class lead to provide Auckland City.
Guy, what's your box number?
I'll take number 19, please.
So, Guy, we have J for Juliet.
Lovely girl.
The future of local government report says the current local government funding and finance system is already under pressure and is not sustainable. How is your party going to respond to this issue?
Oh, I'd love to respond, but I'm actually going to defer.
Do you want
And
to
which
defer?
candidate do you want to defer it to?
Well, Andy can answer any question we throw at him. And as he doesn't belong to a party, he's the best person to answer.
Thanks. So I actually have a series of 3 answers that have been published apparently in the Waiheke News, because they do very much touch on the subject. So so I was sent a bunch of emails to request. Basically, everyone here has been sent that email, and we answered pretty much that question. They didn't actually send me a link, so I can't actually read the articles, but I do have a copy on my phone. Okay, so yeah, right. So basically, at the moment, your money gets taken from your income or wherever, and then it goes to Wellington, and somehow indirectly then it goes back to the decision makers locally who decide, why don't we cut out the middle person and we ring fence some of the income from local areas, and we let the local board spend more of that money, because they should be more informed on what the local needs are. And one way to do that could be to put tax cuts on income and take money from land and ring fence most of that for local spending.
Okay.
Well done.
Madeleine, what box number?
Don't I get another chance?
No.
No.
So, Madeleine, we have N for November. The farming sector is being negatively impacted by overregulation. What will your party do for the farming sector to assist them to deliver positive environmental outcomes without adding more regulation?
That's an excellent question for the Animal Justice Party. We owe a huge gratitude to our farmers, and the AJP definitely honours everything that they've contributed to the nation. We believe that in the 21st century, there are more progressive options than farming animals for food, though. Our flagship policy is to support a transition to a plant-based economy, again, addressing the 50% of greenhouse gases that come from farmed animals.
Okay.
So, button for Guy.
Okay, it is absolute nonsense and a travesty of justice that this government should have placed so many restrictions upon our farmers. They produce enough food to feed 40 million people across the world, and we have 5 million. It is a valuable export that brings us an enormous amount of foreign exchange. The reality is that the emissions that come from New Zealand across the board are 0.07% of the emissions that come out of the world. And therefore we are grossly overacting and trying to push our government into a position of world dominance by worrying about it. We will repeal the Zero Carbon Act. We will destroy the emissions tax, and indeed we will return all, or we will repeal all the restrictions that this government has placed on our farmers so they can get back to doing the job they know so well.
Fiery answer. Okay, Andy, what box number?
Number 3, is that the one in the corner there? Yep. Okay.
Okay, Andy, we have O for Oscar. What is your party's position on the Resource Management Act, known as the RMA reform?
Well, the first thing I have to say is I don't have a party for the aforementioned reasons. And the second is that I'm not specifically certain which Resource Management Act reform this refers to. So, although I would like to ask the candidates here, and if they have any suggestions.
You can use your defer card
Yeah,
if you wish.
Oh, that's probably a good idea.
Who do you think would be more appropriate to answer the question?
Wait, let me think about this.
Guy.
For a second. Resource Management Act. That's about who approves buildings and things, right?
Subdivisions.
Subdivisions.
Yes.
I see. Yeah. Paul. Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
Paul?
I have to recognise the limits of my knowledge, and I believe, defer it to Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, the RMA is a huge document. It's very, very complicated. And yes, it needs reforming. It needs simplifying. But we have absolutely no faith that the current political system and the players within that system are capable of making that decision with the best interest of the people at heart. Because at the end of the day, the United Nations impacts our legislation making process. It's through a process called soft law. And what it does, it signs people up to these programs within the United Nations that they say are non-binding. But as our own Crown Law Office says, they do not have an uninfluential impact on our legislation making. So that's a double negative. So what the Crown Law says, it does impact our legislation process.
Okay, Madeleine. What box number?
17. So, Madeleine, we have ZZ for Zulu. Does your party agree with a policy that prioritises some ethnic groups for medical procedures over others?
Thank you. When we come back to our core values of compassion and equality, we often prioritise meeting the needs. We must prioritise meeting the needs of all New Zealanders. My personal opinion is to trust our healthcare professionals to prioritise those most at risk.
Okay, next up, Christ. What box number?
I'd take number 10, please.
It is question AA, Alpha, Alpha. Oh, I put a different one. AA. Alpha, Alpha. In what ways can New Zealand lead the world?
Have you seen the hashtag cannabis is the answer? Recently, I don't know if you follow the cannabis news. Most of it isn't on public media. Some of us follow that as an alternative source of truth. So in Thailand, they decriminalized or legalized medical cannabis. It was a 1 billion turnover last year. The new Prime Minister of Thailand came in and said, I will legalize medicinal cannabis. Everybody heard, I will legalize cannabis. And so all of the hill forest garden people brought $1 billion to their economy. Now, if our government wanted to choose some form of adult use, licensed cannabis tourism, maybe we could put it over on Waiheke Island. Maybe some of the vineyards could also be cannabis vineyards.
Any Wellington
There is
suggestions?
some legacy farmers allegedly living in Waiheke Island that could vote for Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party to lead the world in a new tourism. That's an old tourism. It's called fun and enjoyment. Ja bless, one love.
Andy, what box number?
Just that one over in the corner there. Number 5, I think. Is that number 5?
4.
4. Okay.
Number 4. Okay, Andy, we have T for Tango. Rest homes are losing registered nurses to Te Whatu Ora as they are unable to match the pay packages. Do you think that pay packages for registered nurses should be equitable across all sections of healthcare?
Well, my short answer is yes, it makes sense. What reason could there be for trying to... well, otherwise the rest homes would not have enough registered nurses because they're not bound to one particular employer. So by the free market, they'll go to whoever pays highest. And so the question, I guess, for everyone is, do you believe that rest homes need registered nurses? Because if you do, either you're going to have to fund the rest homes more, or you're going to have to drop the wages of Te Whatu Ora, and that's not going to happen. So the question is, how much do you think rest homes need registered nurses? Overseas, some rest homes do not exist. This is the burden of elder care overseas is often on the extended family. Luckily in New Zealand, we have people willing, like registered nurses, to work in rest homes. And yeah, so just have a think about that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Guy, what's your next box number?
I'll take number 15, please.
We have E for Echo. The Future of Local Government report says a significant fund is also needed to support climate change adaptation activities. How is your party going to respond to this issue?
Well, the very first thing we need to do is to define climate change adaptation facilities, because I strongly suspect the question implies some sort of mitigation process. And that is not what the NMP believes. We have some very strong scientific evidence that says that the changing weather is not impacted by human activity. It is simply, please feel free to applaud. Therefore, what we should do is we should take each particular area and decide how much we need to spend to ensure that we protect the population against the ravages of changing weather. Here in my electorate, we suffered from flooding. and therefore we should shore up, no pun intended, we should shore up the defences against floods to ensure that we don't follow the ridiculous rhetoric that's going on. We concentrate on protecting our population against the ravages of climate change.
Okay, and Paul, your box number.
I'll take 27 if it's still there, thank you.
We have question A for Alpha. Over the past few years, New Zealand has suffered from many forms of division. How would your party reconnect people and heal the divide so we are a united country once again?
Okay, this is a great question. So we at Rock the Vote, we promote an open and public debate, discussion around the Treaty of Waitangi, but we would exclude academics, lawyers, and politicians from this process. They're the ones that got us into the position we're in right now. And they've done that by reinterpreting and misrepresenting the real te reo and original draft in English of the Treaty of Waitangi. So we think that that needs to be held at a community level so that everybody understands what the real treaty means. And it needs to be interpreted in the English language of the day, not the reinterpreted meanings of the day. So if you really want to look at the language of the day, the only documents that were translated into Maori from English at that time were the 4 Gospels. So go back and read those Gospels because they will tell you exactly what the Maori language of the day is, not the reinterpreted and misrepresented of the day.
And Andy's got a button.
Oh, I just chose this button so I could have something to say on this. So I do agree that we do want to be openly discussing these things, but some people do have very real fears about how the current interpretations of what they might think the Treaty of Waitangi means. And most importantly, whether it conflicts, for me, up to the universal suffrage of 1893. So I'm going to talk about World War I, Easter Rising in Ireland began because the English were trying to conscript the Irish to fight in the wars before the Germans were Nazis. In October 1911, in Wuhan, you might have heard this in 2020, but Wuhan was the site of a revolutionary war. It was an uprising against a birth-based ethnic minority ruling class called the Manchurians, who ruled the multi-ethnic and multicultural empire of China for a couple of hundred years until October 1911. There was a war to remove that birth-based privileged aristocratic class. Now, many of our grandparents and great-grandparents were on either sides of revolutionary wars. But so anyway, this is where people are coming from when they're kind of afraid of going back to those days. So people need to be talking about this and why this may not be what people mean. So talk about these things.
Okay, thank you, candidates, for asking. You want to throw in another button? Okay.
We have a button from Chris.
How will our party reconnect people and heal the divide so we are a united country once again? If you've ever attended a social outing and you've sadly witnessed a few of the musicians having to hide in the green room, well, I tell you it's secret. We don't hide there. It's absolutely amazing. There's not all sorts of things. So to bring the musicians fully out into the audience, what we need is crowd participation. What the musicians do in the green room connects the citizens, the humans, and the people to the human soul enriching experience that is brought onto them by their mystical culture that has brought some musicians world fame from the consumption of cannabis. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody consumes cannabis. All I'm saying is that the human body has an endocannabinoid system, and I suggest that you research it and then possibly speak to the other politicians, myself included, about how we can change the common understanding of what a cannabis user is. God bless, one love.
And while mentioning on there, we're going to be taking a break. And I just let you know, we don't have a green room for the candidates to hide in. So you can actually talk to them on stage right here. Or I've actually been pointed, there is a green room, but we can all walk in it. So we'll see you back after the break for hard-hitting questions. And welcome back to It's in the Ballot. Now let's get ready for hard-hitting questions. Okay, so for hard-hitting questions, these are the questions we get all candidates answer to the same question. And some news there, you cannot use your defer cards because you're deferring it to someone who's already going to be answering the question. And don't bother using your button cards because you're already going to be giving your answer anyway. We have two hard-hitting questions for this afternoon. Our first hard-hitting question is, what is the most pressing issue in the Auckland Central Electorate? Let's kick off with Paul.
Okay, for me, it's population growth and the implications thereof. So we're already seeing the overloading of our infrastructure, our sewage system, big sinkholes appearing everywhere, up to 3 or 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of sewage going into the harbour every day. So we're also seeing is councils imposing rates rises well and truly above the cost of living. We're seeing between 7 and 15% rate rises on average. So why are we seeing such high rate rises? The simple answer is the imposition of things like the C40 status for the city come with huge cost budgets. That alone, the C40 status, has a budget of $2.8 billion over a period of 4 years. It provides absolutely no service improvement. All it does is provide electric instead of diesel buses. So it's ideologically different.
Thank you. Next up, Andy.
You can probably guess my answer to this one. So the most pressing issue in the Auckland Central Electorate, I believe, is trying to decide what is the most pressing issue. Because we all have different ways of assessing what's the most pressing issue, what's the most urgent, what's the most basic need, and both ourselves on behalf of others. So how do we know what we think is most pressing is actually the most pressing? And that's with more, how do decision makers like us, well, maybe us, how do we know what you guys want? And when I was studying in the university, not one time did I remember any local council person, no local government person. None of them came up to us. We didn't have any sausage sizzle where they could just ask us what were our thoughts. And so, because I thought it didn't matter. That's why single transferable vote is important, because it matters. That makes sure your vote important. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Madeleine.
Thank you. So the most pressing issue is the cost of living. When people are struggling, their companions, animals, are often affected as well. Our party's core values include passion and equality, and I feel personally strongly that people should have more of a level playing field. The Animal Justice Party will work with other parties who share our values.
Okay, Guy.
In all truth, it's not for the local MP to decide what the pressing issue is. Too many MPs try to control what happens in their electorate, when in the reality, a local MP's job is to support from the centre the initiatives and actions that the local authorities want to take. And I'm not just talking about the council, I'm talking about genuine people-orientated local authorities. So before I answer this question, I need you to know that I've already consulted the Heart of the City CEO. I've consulted the chairman of the local board so that I understand what they need. I invited Wayne Brown to invite me to his office, and he didn't even reply. But what the others decided was that the most pressing issue is safety, crime. We have to return our streets to safety, and we have a 9-point law and order policy that will ensure quick resolution and safety for our citizens.
Christ, what your answer?
What is the most pressing?
Your microphone would be helpful.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are just back from a 420 smoker break,
Ironically, yeah.
just outside of my therapeutical window. Now, what is the most pressing issue? Probably awareness about your therapeutical window. Those in the Auckland Central are not aware that they have an endocannabinoid system, nor that they have a therapeutical window. And when you take too much cannabinoids in the wrong quantitatives, you may have an increase in pain. You might have an increase in anxiety. You might feel a little bit too sleepy and not able to answer the questions. And that's why you need a little bit better about education on cannabis. And if I am elected in the Auckland Central, I will bring CBD to the CBD, and I will also be bringing THC as a safer alternative to the current markets of prohibition of the freedom of rights to drink in the streets and have a liquor ban at the beaches. So I will encourage the local cities to increase liquor bans and liquor places and smoking bans and smoking places where we adults can have a non-secretive spot for us all to socialize in private and in public, bringing more awareness to the fact we need CBD in the CBD of Auckland Central. One love.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Sorry, this is what happens when you end up cracking up laughing through the whole thing as being the host. It's difficult to get on to the next step. Okay, so hard-hitting question number 2. Central government increasingly communicates... Oh, have we had guys one? Yes, we did. Yeah. No, sorry. Stacey just sat there and said to me, Yep.
I'd like to say no, but the answer is yes.
Central government increasingly communicates with citizens via emails and text. Therefore, non-computer literate visit libraries for their assistance in changes to central government practices and legislations impact local communities, which councils are expected to deliver without funding. Do you believe that central government should form partnerships with councils to deliver central government services? If so, how should these partnerships be funded? Let's kick off with Andi.
Everyone in the local council was elected locally. They're not list MPs. I should also point out that I don't need to talk about what list MPs and electorates are, but so we trusted these people to be in our council, and we local people elected them to represent our local needs. So why don't we trust them with a bit more of our local money that we generate? So I'll definitely be supportive of ring fencing some of our tax revenue. Whether that includes a restructure of the tax system is a different question, but I would like to point out the previous 2 tax working groups suggested some changes. Labour only took some of them. National only took the recommendation to raise GST to 15% and totally ignored the other recommendation. So the Opportunities Party did kind of pick up on some of this, and they did propose something back in 2017, but I'm not sure anyone remembers. But if we adapt some of that and say part of that funding, that ring fence some of that money which has gone to national central government and put it for local government to use, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Okay, Madeleine.
So we primarily focus on animal welfare and environmental sustainability. However, I believe central government funding to support local councils should prioritise sustainability, equality, and improving animals and human lives. Funds can be allocated based on the idea that you can't put a value on doing the right thing, and improving lives should be a top priority of government spending.
Okay. Christ. Your answer.
Yes, I do believe that the central government should form a partnership, because obviously we need some form of top-down, bottom-up, top-up-down communication, because we don't want them to dictate to us, but we need that partnership. If you've ever been in a partnership, hopefully it swings both ways or mutually beneficial. I would fund it, obviously, by allowing the councils to form some form of social clubs where they can cultivate cannabis and raise awareness through these social clubs that is council approved, and therefore the local police could discuss with the council how they can turn a blind eye to the somewhat speakeasies that will pop up, much like the Dutch Amsterdam coffee shop, where the police turn a blind eye to the distribution of cannabis. We would be doing the same thing. That would help us fund the mental health awareness problems by giving people the ability to talk openly to their doctors, openly to each other, without some form of police incarceration. I believe that the funding from that would obviously help not only the co-governance of the relationships and moving forward with every single element that is to do with politics and the entire country. So yes to co-governance and yes to cultivating good community spirit together with cannabis.
I wonder how much of that was prepared by Michael Appleby, but I love it. Okay, next up, Guy.
There are a couple of hidden questions actually within the question. There is the situation, first of all, where people who don't use the internet, how can they make their feelings felt? How can we best represent them? Well, if you send me down to Wellington as your elected MP, every other week on a Saturday, I will open my office. My electoral officer will run a diary, and I will be willing and very keen to have everybody come in and give me their views on the local situation so that I know what they want. The trouble is that the parties that exist at the moment, the candidates go down to Wellington and they become under the party whip, and therefore they lose the opportunity to do that for their electors. Within the NMP, we will have no party whip to allow each candidate to work hard on the issues of the people of their electorate.
It sounds like we might be returned to the British system where voting takes 10 minutes instead of 30 seconds by the sounds of that.
That would be cheeky.
Okay, Paul.
Okay, so we don't believe that there should be partnerships between central government and local government. They're two totally different entities. They both have totally different responsibilities and totally different service provision requirements. But that said, the reason we don't believe that there should be any partnerships is because central government tends to devolve its responsibility without commensurate remuneration. But they also devolve the responsibilities inferred upon them by external organisations like the United Nations. Auckland is the only council in New Zealand that has C40 status. Now, I've already talked about C40 and the budget of $2.8 billion over 4 years, but that's an unfair burden on ratepayers. The provision of climate remittance, for want of a different term, is not a ratepayer funded responsibility.
Okay, now we're getting off to my favourite time of the show. The question will be, if elected, what will be the first members' bill you put into the biscuit tin? Now, every non-executive member can put in a member's bill, and there have been some very interesting ones over the years. A very controversial one that made the news was Sue Bradford's anti-smacking bill. There was Nando's, how do you say his last name, the one that headed the dreadlocks? Yeah, his one was the waste minimisation bill, which actually forced councils to separate their rubbish that can be recycling to reduce what went to the tip. There's been there's been many members' bills that have gone through the House we could spend all day talking about them, but no, we don't want to do that. We need to hear what the candidates' members' bills will be. You get 2 minutes to describe what your members' bill and why and what the functions of it to work, and we'll kick off with Andi.
I'm not going to talk about single transferable vote anymore today. I'm assuming that's already going to be mainstream. So my private member's bill, if I did want to put one in, would be for something that no current party would probably risk, even though it is probably in the interest of all their parties. And that is a completely consensual alternative to imprisonment. You may have heard of the prison abolition movement, which says that prisons are inhumane and they're really costly. And because prisons isolate people from society, they don't help them rehabilitate. And so people say, okay, why don't we put people on parole? Well, we've heard in the past week or so, sometimes that comes with some risks. So how do we mitigate those risks? How about I propose something that you may have heard before? It's called Botox. Botox? How does this even have anything to do with anything? Okay, so I was at this scientific conference thing, and they were talking about how to correct patellar maltracking. That's your kneecap. If it gets pulls to one side or another, it hurts your leg. That if sometimes it's caused by one squad being stronger than the other, so you can inject it with Botox to weaken it, and then it makes the other one stronger, and then it corrects it. Now, Botox is completely reversible. The muscles recover afterwards. How about we offer as an alternative Botox injections to the legs as an imprisonment alternative, as it's a possible parole thing. If the defendant, if the prosecution, if the jury, if the judge, and if the defendant's parents and grandparents all agree that it's an okay option, why don't we give them that option? It's a consensual thing. It's their freedom to choose. So, does anyone in the audience have any questions about this idea of Botox to your legs as a potential consensual alternative to the current parole methods?
I want to know, how long does each treatment last?
Okay, so in answer to your question, so there was a scientific thing that was presented in the Auckland Bioengineering Institute. So basically, when I'm not 100% sure because I can't remember, it was a couple of years ago. But basically, they already did this trial. They have established safe dosages for Botox in your quads to correct patellar maltracking, and it wears off.
Yeah. It wears off.
It's better than the historical alternative, which was actually permanently crippling people.
You've definitely got us all talking.
Yeah. So that's my private members bill, other than STV, because I don't think it's going to be a private members bill, because I think by the time I get into Parliament, it's probably going to be a mainstream thing.
Okay, next up, Paul. What will be your first members bill you put in the biscuit tin?
Okay, for me, the very first one is binding citizens-initiated referendum and the 100-day voter veto rule. So what we're talking about is actually true democracy, something we haven't seen in this country to date. It has been in effect in Switzerland for over 105 years. They on average do 3 or 4 processes of referenda every year, and it can have up to 15 odd questions. And it's never been abused. So the difference about that is that binding citizens initiated referendum, it actually reverses the power imbalance. It reverses the power of politics back to the people. It takes the power out of Parliament. So if we have a voice, we can actually get people to actually engage in the process again. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, people are becoming less and less engaged in the political process. So if that's happening election after election, surely we have to realise that the current system is A, limited, and B, not working. So the only real alternative is to engage the people through the binding citizens initiated referendum. The 100-day voter veto rule is the same thing, but turned on its head. It's where the people get to say about a bill passed in Parliament within that 100 days, we don't like that legislation, and we want to have a citizens initiated referendum on it. The difference is that it's binding, because the current citizens initiated referendum in Parliament is nothing more than a poll. It's not binding on government, and it should be. So the only way to return that around is by making this stuff compulsory and returning the power to the people.
Okay, Christ, what would be your first member's bill? Replacing the smell of sulphur in Rotorua with marijuana?
That would be a benefit, but we like the sulfur compounds. They actually help the terpenes grow and the chemical formulation known as trichomes, which are attached to the cannabis plant. So, no, I would not do that. We need sulfur. What I would do, though, is I would add to the already existing legislation that controls alcohol, and I would slip the word including cannabis next to it. So we would have some form of alcohol licensing, alcohol legislation, and right next to all of the terms and conditions with every other situation where you have alcohol, you would have also cannabis. Then shop owners would be able to apply for an alcohol distribution license or a cannabis distribution license. Any farmer who cultivates wine or spirits or any other liquor that creates alcohol could apply for a license that would say cannabis on it. It is a very, 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 very easy add-on. I just add cannabis to an already existing legislation. Once we find out how easy it is to live in a society where we have human body sovereignty of the rights and choices of what they put into their mouths, then we can discuss maybe harm reduction and possibly flippity floppity flip around how much consumption we're using for this, that, and the other. But until then, the first thing that I will be doing will be simply adding cannabis right next to alcohol. We can advertise it not at the sports grounds. We can advertise it probably not a paid sponsorship, Liquor Land. I'm not encouraging to create a weed world. What I'm currently wanting is a very, very, very safe alternative to the current industries that run our country. There's 3 of them, and I won't mention them because they know that I know who they are, and that's why I stand here representing against them. You know who you are. I want to take it away from big pharma and give it back to little farmers so that we can heal all of our people. I will implement cultivation of cannabis through the schooling system. I will add the fact that all children should know how to grow all herbs, what is now known as weed. God bless, one love, vote for me, and we will set the plant free.
I can picture some customs and excise inspections having very interesting results. Okay, Madeleine, what will be your first member's bill in the biscuit tin?
Well, it wouldn't surprise you, but I would put forward a bill to support spay and neuter programs. The number of homeless animals in New Zealand is exploding. The pressure on shelters, already bursting with unplanned litters, is immense, and thousands of cats and dogs are euthanized in New Zealand each year as a consequence. As a guardian of 2 cats, I just can't imagine anything worse than that happening to my furry family. Funding for desexing is something we must action. The Animal Justice Party will invest in desexing programs, making it more affordable for Kiwis and relieving the burden on shelters. Desexing also offers numerous health benefits for our companion animals. It reduces the risk of certain cancers and infections, leading to longer, healthier lives. It can also help mitigate behavioural issues, enhancing the bond that we share with them. And let's not forget the impact on our communities. Stray animals can pose a threat to public health and safety, while desexed animals are less likely to roam and contribute to unwelcome behaviours. By investing in desexing, we are investing in the well-being of our neighbourhoods. In conclusion, funding for spay and neuter programs is a step towards a brighter future for our pets, our communities, and our nation as a whole. Thank you.
Okay. Guy.
Well, I'm reminded, of course, that a private member's bill is just that. It is the view of a private member. And I do actually have 6 private member bills in my briefcase, but I believe the very first one should be one that delivers to the people as they have told me they want. and therefore my first private member's bill will be to introduce a royal commission to look at the behaviour of elected and unelected principals during the so-called COVID crisis. And it will not be the same as the current government have introduced by the same name. My Royal Commission will have a full set of terms of reference that look at all aspects and all actions that were taken by the government during that so-called crisis. And it will have a provision in there to make recommendations on whether prosecutions are valid and should go ahead or not. And lastly, I will make sure that that Royal Commission is both fair and seen to be fair, because I will have it run by 3 foreign judges who have no responsibility to the jurisdiction of this land and can deliver to you all a fair and just outcome.
Now, just want to ask, will they be judges from Commonwealth nations?
I'm undecided on that point, because my main concern is that they should have no connection with New Zealand or the judiciary here in order to be able to render a fair outcome.
Okay. So now we're off for closing statements on why the Auckland Central voters should give you their electoral vote. And just remember, there are many candidates who are not here to give their statements, so you can guess what they are. Christ, your closing statement.
Well, just as Andy, we're going to pick the closest leader. Hooray! That was easy. Now, back to just living our lives. No, if only picking the leader was as easy as picking questions out of a ballot box. We all understand that picking a leader to lead us is some form of torture, because I've only got 42 more seconds to encourage you to vote for me in this next election. Why would I want you to vote for me in this next election? Why would I want to vote for myself? Because I can tell you I'm brave enough and strong enough to stand in front of anybody who wants to talk down to me or try to represent me as them. And so I represent me as me, and I represent all of the cannabis people who want, obviously not to be dressed in a tailor-fitted cannabis suit, but at least to be represented by somebody who is fully aware of all purposes for cannabis, whether it's industrial, recreational, adult use, spiritual use. I have tried it all over the last 3 decades, and I'm willing to represent the cannabis portfolio that is yet to be politician.
Okay, next up, Andy, your closing statements.
Well, it's going to be the same as my opening statement, consistency. So everyone here, most of us won't be elected to Parliament. This doesn't mean that nothing happens for the next 3 years. So just remember the single transferable vote. It's an issue where if we don't have single transferable vote and we still have the current vote, there's always going to be voters who would have otherwise taken a punt on something they really believed in, but didn't think that it might not be able to get the support of the major parties, and so they then choose not to vote for that. If we could instead recycle that vote to their second or third choices or something like that, that would be wonderful. And that's only something which only became possible after computer science advanced in the past 100 years. It's called single transferable vote, and it lets you recycle instead of just throw away your first vote. We're all about reducing, reusing, and recycling. Why don't we apply it to voting? Now, the other thing is I already have a referendum, request in mind, which is actually legal binding. Check out my Instagram or Linktree. It's got the link to, if you search on our action station, you might be able to find it.
Okay, Madeleine.
So myself and the Animal Justice Party are passionate about improving New Zealand's environmental situation and protecting our unique ecosystems for future generations of people and animals. I believe that if we nurture the connection between people, animals, and the environment, we can move towards a more sustainable future for New Zealand. Don't just be one more vote for the major parties, vote for your values instead, and help us to give animals a voice in Parliament.
Okay, Guy, your closing statement.
Well, before you decide to send me to Wellington as your representative, you need to know who you're voting for. So very briefly, I was 17 when I joined the Royal Air Force, trained as a fighter pilot, chased Russians around the North Sea, before, after 12 years, leaving, joining a merchant bank for 3 years, and for the next 39 years, I actually ran an international business that extended into 18 countries, and it lasted for all that time. So when you're considering whether I'm a worthy person to send to Wellington, I have international experience. I am used to solving problems across different ethnicities, and we have lots of those in this electorate. I know how to resolve disputes, and I know how to listen to the people and represent their views, because that's what I've been doing for half a century. Send me to Wellington, I'll do that for you.
And Paul, your closing statements.
So a vote for me and for Rock the Vote through Freedoms New Zealand and Rock the Vote is a vote for a party that believes in personal freedoms and traditional values and accountability within government. Those are values we don't see in the current political system. We're a grassroots movement rather than a political party. So me, I'm an aircraft engineer by trade. I've done 12 years in the Air Force. I've got 14 grandchildren. That's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing, because I don't want them to suffer under the same system any longer than what we have. We can change the way things are done. We can bring accountability back to Parliament, and we can make people more engaged in the process, and they can have more of a voice in the process. All you have to do is vote Rock the Vote, Paul Davie, and Freedoms New Zealand Party Vote.
Now, just before we go, if you'd like to kindly make a donation for the running of the event, we do have a donation box at the front for that consider and help with the cost of the venue hire. These events aren't free of charge to produce, and every cent goes a long way. As we can say, we probably get less funding than many of the political parties, and maybe we might need to do it It's in the Ballot party, get the funding and produce It's in the Ballot shows. It's a tempting offer. It's a tempting offer. If we get 500 members to sit there and make that happen, we could sit there and look at that. Can I thank the crew in the studio for making today work, and thank Stacey for joining us from Wellington. Can we also give a big round of applause to the candidates for making their way out today to put their feet to the It's in the Ballot fire. And just before we go, Stacey, can you please put up the QR code? But we'd like you, this election day, decide to ditch Channel 1 or Channel 3 for your election night show and get your election night result coverage from the It's in the Ballot team. So if you can scan the QR code on there, and that will take you through to Eventbrite, where you can get your online tickets that we get emailed to. They're free of charge, but it's just a way of sending you a nice, lovely little reminder. You can see some of our highlights, and we're going to sit there and hear around the country from the real people, not from the political bigwigs that have got a satellite dish streaming out the show from there. And if we have a party that's in, say, a broom closet of a pub in the middle of nowhere where the nearest telephone line's 200 kilometres away or something like that, we would like to get your view from there. So please do that. We will be back tomorrow for our Mangakiki Electorate show. If you'd like to be there in person, feel free to go up there, and thank you for putting the information on screen there. And we also have the Pakaranga show on Monday night. So we'll look forward to that. And thank you to our audience for taking the time to watch the show. And thank you for making a Wellingtonian feel very welcome in the city of, I think, I used to call it house sales, but I think they've overly ballooned a bit now and very interesting rates bills. So, you know, depending, you know, you can add your own twist to what you want to add to that. So yes, thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
It's in the ballot. Provide a service to the ministry. Okay, I just want to say thank you to the It's in the Ballot team. They provide a service to the minor parties that the big media just don't want to know about. So, you know, thank you for giving us a voice. Thank you for all that you do. We know it comes at a personal cost, and we wish we could remunerate you for that. But at the end of the day, thank you very much. You do a great service. Woo-hoo.